Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. Now today's video is a follow-up to my IL Eurostick cut down. But in this video I'm going to be showing you how to use your stock RK one-up wire harness in order to mount a 187 connector. But you can then use this information to use any sort of switch that you want. Some switches don't use a 187, they'll use a 0.250 connector, and that's much bigger than this. Well, so yeah, let's get into it. Now the first method is something I'm calling the hot swap method, and what that is simply using a tool to hit the let's get the focus, to hit little tabs in these little sections here. There you go. Now what's actually holding these wires in place is the JST connector, which is simply has a little clip that you can hit with a tool. This is what I used on my own time, but I figured, you know what, you don't have any tools, maybe you don't want to order any tools, maybe you just want to use whatever's laying around the house. Well, this is a simple paper clip. I'm going to use this to simply hit the little tab in the inside. I can then pull out the cable. There you go. And that's it. Now, if you decide to do this, because what's going to happen is you're going to be ordering 0.187 connectors for your buttons, right? And those come in the same style housing, but it's going to be 2-pin. This is a 4-pin. All right? So the process is the same. So you order your 0.187 connectors from wherever you want, or your cables, right, from wherever you want, DIY, Retro Arcade, Amazon, Focus Attack, Paradise Arcade, whatever. But you'll get these and do this process of hitting the little tab, okay? So that's example one, and let's do this other little tab. This is actually a lot easier than the tool I usually use. Now, if you bend the tab too much and it like sinks into the crimp itself, you could just use your little nail or anything else to bend it out. All right, there we go. So you can re-bend that out even if you bend it in. Now, what else I want to tell you is that when you use these for your switches, everything needs to be paired up. So this here, the fact that I took these two out, actually represents one switch. I mean, obviously, because I just pulled it out, right? So the way you want to think of these is in two pairs. One pair is for one switch, the other pair is for the other switch. Which means that when you put these back together, you're going to want to line up you're going to want to use the same cables within the pair. Because things might look confusing once you're in the inside. It's cool to twist these up a little bit so you know you have this here is a pair. Because what could happen to you for those people barely doing this for the first time is that you might mix up cables and you might have one cable from this pair and another cable from this pair thinking that they are together, but they're not. So this is the hot swap method. The next method is the splice. Alright guys, so now that we got the hot swap method out of the way, right, that was extremely easy. Except we run into a unintended shortcoming, and that is the cable length. So when you do this, you're going to be limited to the amount of cable length that you have. Now, when splicing, you are in control of how much cable you're going to want to use. Generally speaking, you're going to want to cut the cable closest to the ends that you need. So, for example, I don't need this switch anymore. So, boom, I cut it off, right? But I need this end, okay? When it comes to these cables, right, if I want to use maximum amount of cable, I'll just cut it right here on this end. And this is something I needed to do with my Marvel vs. Capcom cabinet because the Player 2 heavy punch and heavy kick weren't capable of reaching, or the cables that I had used weren't capable of reaching the encoder, right? So then I decided to do a splice. Now when you're splicing with scissors or with any other cutting tool, because for example, I have a wire stripper. So then at that point I would just use the appropriate gauge for the appropriate diameter of wire that I have. But when you're using scissors, which is something most people are going to have in their homes, what you're going to want to do is use the little bit amount of force as possible in order to cut the silicone sleeve. Because that's really all you're trying to do. You're not trying to cut the whole entire cable at this point. You just want the sleeve cut. Alright, so you see how I just cut the sleeve? Hopefully that was all in focus, because there you go. Pulled out the sleeve, and that was a really good cut. Something I suggest is you spin these around in order to create a more solid cable. Now, how much cable you're going to cut is all up to you. At the end of it all, you're going to want to cover it with electrical tape. Okay, same situation here. Use as little force as possible to get the edge in to the sleeve, and then spin it. Use your nail to dig into it more, because your nail is not going to cut the metal cables on the inside. And then you just lift away. Doing the twist again. Now this is and can be time consuming. What you'll need to do first and foremost is relax yourself. You don't want to build like any sort of, there's nothing for you to be anxious about. You have no need to build up anxiety. There's like nothing wrong here, which is why you're here in this video in the first place, is to learn, right? So now that you're self-educating, you just got to watch this over and over again, or watch the video or any other video while you're doing this stuff, so you can have a more clear, step-by-step explanation of what's going on. Okay, so don't be nervous. Like, this stuff is all extremely simple. Okay, so anyway, so the next step, we're gonna create an X. Now I like to line up the cables, the ends together, and then create the X. So instead of going over here, I like to go down here, and I'm just simply going to braid the two cables together. And that's a splice. So another thing I like to do is bend this parallel to the cable itself. Get some electrical tape, cut off just enough to, protect your cable. This is how I did it at first, but then I graduated to being able to understand crimping and do crimping and crimp my own ends. Now I wanted to do that for this video. I even have the ends here, but I think that's going to be unnecessary and a bit of an advanced work. If someone's interested in that, drop a comment and I will film a how to crimp the spade connectors, right? But also how to crimp JST connectors, because I have the crimping tool for this as well, and this is what is required in order to plug into the either 2, 4, or 6, or 8 pin wire harness in order to plug into the encoder board, and then this end into your buttons. Okay, so real quick before I end the video, this is a stock RK1-up joystick. This came out of my Miss Pac-Man Galaga machine, and these are the most infamous or the most famous DX44 switches, and look how they just plug and play. They fit perfectly, right? The only thing you're gonna have to do here is break off the wire management clip that's gonna be on your joystick. Now this also works for the Sanwa stock PCB, which I don't recommend doing. I recommend this individual switch setup because what happens is that eventually you have a switch that malfunctions on you. And with this individual switch setup, you'll just simply place an order, or maybe you've already ordered a handful of these. Not that you're gonna have a switch malfunction with these switches anyway, but when it does happen, a handful of years after the fact that you first bought them, you're just gonna spend a few dollars or $1 on it. Now the other cheaper switches are gonna be a lot more stiff. They're gonna be a lot louder, and they're gonna be prone to malfunctioning, such as this thing. Jesus Christ. Like, listen to that, how stiff that is versus this. Well, anyway, so future content I'm going to be having is a comparison to a stock arcade 1-up joystick lever, a sand wall, and maybe an Industrious Lorenzo stick, and also doing a part swap with a sand wall to a stock arcade 1-up joystick in order to help those who like these sticks but maybe want something more out of it. I suggest the sand wall parts because one of the most important pieces is your actual lever, which is this. And this is actually thinner than a stock sand wall stick or an aftermarket one, such as, for example, an extended sand wall shaft. They're all the same diameter, and this is too thin. Alright, so if this is too thin, that means that the pivot and everything else is also going to be unusable. So you're going to want to place an order for a sand wall pivot and a few other parts for a sand wall stick to fit on your stock arcade 1-up joystick lever housing. But all the parts are interchangeable. And another thing I'm going to be filming is some maintenance work, because you will have to add some silicone grease to this pivot point on all Japanese-based joysticks, including their clones, which off the top of my head, I'm speaking about Sandwall, their clones, Shimizu, and their clones. Thank you for watching. I hope that this video was helpful, because my mind is kind of like scanner mind, and I have a lot of thoughts going on as well as a lot of talking going on, and I kind of trip myself up. So I'll work on that in the future, and I hope that this will help you guys into getting whatever joystick setup you want on your arcade 1-up. You can use this setup in order to buy the cherry switches and mount them to your sand wall. You can use this setup, mount the cherry switches to your stock arcade 1-up joystick. You can use this setup to then buy your Industrious Lorenzos or half competition sticks and mount them straight into your arcade 1-up after you cut down the frame. Alright? Well, thanks for watching, guys.